Nearly a quarter of 18 to 25-year-olds in London don't have jobs because something has gone horribly wrong in the employment creation mechanism.
This is Shefaly Yogendra, a boardroom powerhouse helping shape the UK's AI strategy. We got to speak about the uncomfortable truth and what leaders are getting dangerously wrong as they try to navigate this transformational period in our economy.
The one time that a major bomb was used, I don't think it fell on the boardroom. I see the AI debate in a similar way. The brightest, smartest boards, they are discussing how many months till there is no food on the shelves. The LLMs currently existent, they have no way to de-escalate. They are the kind of people who will take a pub brawl if they were people.
What do you think the focus should be on? Shefaly, nice to meet you.
And you as well. Thank you for having me.
I know, fascinating. I know, and you've been on a real journey. I mean, you have been sat with some of the most impressive or interesting boards and working with some incredible leaders on your journey.
Yes. I think the most interesting one amongst those was when I was asked to join a group of advisors helping to shape, in whichever way possible, the UK's AI strategy, and this was in 2019.
I can't help but think that AI is is it the nuke of boardrooms? Are we going to say catastrophic impact and change?
Yeah, I thought about that wording a little bit because, as you know, a lot of business language, including the term strategy itself, comes from military warfare, disagreement, discord, fighting, and so on and so forth. Yeah. But at the same time, when we talk about, is this a nuclear device? You'll probably be familiar with the King's College study, which said, and I think it's now 2 months old or something, which found that in any disagreement kind of situation, the LLMs currently existent, in 95% of the cases, they have no way to de-escalate, they escalate, which means that they are the kind of people who will take a pub brawl if they were people. There is going to be a fallout. We know the one time that a major bomb was used in history, there was a massive fallout. And more importantly, it is also worth considering the scope. Board of directors is made of 5, 7, 10 people. Some sectors you'll find larger boards, 15 people boards. But the decisions that they make are much wider. They're much wider in scope in terms of what they impact the whole society. And when the original bomb fell, I don't think it fell on the boardroom.
Yes.
It fell on a lot of people, unsuspecting people. Yeah. And I see the AI debate in a similar way. Although I would add that the brightest, smartest, most switched on boards are at the moment not discussing just AI. They are discussing how many months till there is no food on the shelves. Because the planting cycle, the fertilizer supply chain is nearly dead. Equally, going back to the AI question, helium is dead. That's an essential component, I can tell you as an electronics engineer in manufacture of chips. This is not a fact I just discovered. We discovered sort of semiconductor design when we were students, 18, 19 years old. So many different supply chains are dramatically affected. And because the very foundation, the places where these things were being made have been bombed, and they will take huge amount of capex to kind of restore and bring them back to operation. We don't know how many years of disruption we are looking at.
I think most people think that this is going to have a much broader and longer term impact.
But this will also mean that we have to pull together as society, and that means that we don't have the luxury of excluding people anymore. Yeah. And we have been seeing progression towards the separation of the extremely wealthy and the extremely poor. In fact, I think it was last week that it was on the news that nearly a quarter of 18 to 25-year-olds in London not only don't have jobs, they are on universal credit. They are not on universal credit because they want to be.
No.
They're on universal credit because something has gone horribly wrong in the employment creation mechanism. And that's the question we should be asking, whether we are doing it as employers in the boardrooms or we are just fellow citizens who are asking the question, what do we do about the next generations? Because they are here in front of us.
Yeah, you talk about the boardrooms and how we have these responsibilities to our customers, our employees, our team, and then also the shareholders. The issue is that just the way that the world is structured is that you've got to compete, haven't you? And so you've got to be as good as your next competitor, or better than. And as people are finding more efficient ways to deliver their goods either faster or cheaper, or to meet their customers' needs in some way more effectively, they're using AI and technology to do that. And effectively, that means that, sadly, systems and technology can do things faster, more accurately, and more efficiently than humans.
So you can't outrun physics, and you can't print a burger, which means that every problem we think about solving, we have to first conceptualize it correctly. And at the moment, our conceptual problem is at a very basic level, a survival mechanism thing, which will show up in many different ways. Then coming back to the question about doing things faster, cheaper, and so on. And before that, you made an observation about job numbers and how they transition. And people always say, oh, yeah, there'll be new jobs. I have said it. I mean, in 2018, I spoke at a GRC conference. And I made that point, new jobs will be created. But 2018, the speed with which models are currently updating themselves, they were completely different planets of speed. And we have plenty of references in history. If you go back and read the literature from the time of Dickens and stuff, there is a transition period and there is a pain. Someone has to bear that pain. We know that. And that pain will be borne by people who live with us, who live in our houses, our communities, and so on. So I know I have gone in different directions with it for a reason. If we historically look at different things which were pointing in this direction, corporations first cut costs through machinery, automation, or mechanization. Then when services were made possible using the internet as a backbone or the web as a backbone, people offshored to cheaper economies. Then they cut jobs in those cheaper economies because mechanization and automation. You may have noticed in the last, 3 months, 3 major CEOs have quit. Most recently, I think the Coca-Cola CEO, he said, I can start the AI transformation, I can't finish it. That's a really big thing for a CEO to admit. But I looked and I was disappointed to find that no journalist took it upon themselves to go to him and say, what did you mean? What does he mean by I can't finish it? What is he expecting to happen? So when we now look at doing things with automation, we are continuing on the crazy path. I have to call it a crazy path because we can see that it is not necessarily going to lead us to a place where we can address the pain point, the little valley we will have to cross to come out the other side, to create new jobs. And what will it take? I would situate the entire conversation around AI in that light. We have future generations to create and preserve and grow prosperity for. If the only way we know is to make things faster and cheaper, something is wrong with our imagination.
Why is that? If I was to measure the performance of us humans, right, I think that probably the best metric I can think of is the standard of living. I'm trying to raise that for everybody, right? We can't, and that includes health, doesn't it? And there's lots of little metrics that are around that. And isn't finding, if by making things cheaper, more efficient, faster, that makes a lot of resources more accessible to more people to raise the standard of living? That's my view on that.
We are living longer in this country. There was a Bloomberg piece earlier this week which said the British are living longer but sicker.
Right.
And as far as standard of living is concerned, there is more stress in families now, financially speaking, because the definition of what is essential has moved.
Yep.
And as a result, it is almost imperative for families that both parents are out at work to meet that definition of essential.
Yeah. So if you don't think the focus should be on making it faster, more efficient, more accessible, all that kind of stuff, what do you think the focus should be on?
I think we are at a point where we need a fresh conversation about what is our social contract,
Yep.
what are we here for, why do we exist, and what kind of world we want to create. I remember writing this in March 2020. In a crisis, just because you're not paying attention doesn't mean a society won't be reshaped around us. It is up to us to decide what the shape of that society will be. And as an example, before we started recording, we were talking about the house I live in, right? It's over 100 years old. It's definitely like 125, right? It's a converted house. It was for horses and carriages, and now human beings live in it. So it wasn't designed for human beings.
Yep.
But there are certain things in the house which I have discovered over the years, which are still standing after 125 years. When you look at more modern buildings, we have made them faster, taller, they made them quicker, they are accessible or otherwise to people. And what do we have? We have a cladding scandal. So we need to decide whether we want to make things that suit humanity, enables humanity to be creative, enable humanity to solve imperative problems. We can make things faster, cheaper, but we can be wiped out by floods, which are happening with increasing frequency. We can be wiped out by unforeseen winter storms. Those are the things which have made, and I have discussed this in the book, businesses find most of their work uninsurable because nobody is going to underwrite the risk. And if we don't connect the dots between all of those things, what strategic vision are we setting? Yeah. So to your point, how do we measure whether we are progressing or we are going somewhere positive? I think we are overdue a conversation about what are we here for.
That social contract, and how would you reconstruct it? What ideas do you have around that? When you talk about that social contract, are there certain things that you think we should be refocusing on?
I think it is important to, remember that the reason why society exists is because we started the conversation by talking about diversity.
Yes.
No two people will have the same view on what the social contract should look like.
Yeah.
And when we think about how people form their opinions, it's really fascinating. I just mentioned nobody went and asked that Coca-Cola CEO, what did you mean?
Yeah.
How do we form our opinions? We form our opinions by the influences around us, whether it is social media, print media, mass media of any kind. In fact, today, the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee has put out a report which is titled Disinformation Diplomacy. And in the book, there is a section on the change in the information environment. And it's not this as simple as saying disinformation campaigns run by state actors or misinformation campaigns, which can be inadvertent or a combination, or the filtering of information through particular people's lenses, narrower and narrower. In fact, it was interesting. I was listening to a Bloomberg podcast. I don't know whether it is kosher to mention other podcasts here.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, kosher.
But the journalist who was interviewing a French hacker said, I resent now having to go on the web to look up for something because I now prefer to look at it from the window of the LLM that he prefers to use. It made me stop for a second and say, what have you just admitted? You are a journalist. You have just admitted that is how you're gathering your information. So to go back there and ask how are people's opinions being formed, because the information is there. We had a little exchange about knowledge and insight and so on and so forth. It's all there, but something hiding in plain sight, which you don't discover and don't actually question, critically examine, and allow it to shape in some way your view, that thing still exists.
Yeah.
So the social contract question is harder than it looks, but it needs to be inclusive. And it is going to require a lot of leadership, essentially, on a country-by-country basis, because it's very clear with the war going on right now that each country is literally on their own, leading to their own particular problems. And yesterday there was a claim that of all the countries, Britain is going to be affected the most.
You've got people that have a real responsibility who sit at the top of these organisations, big organisations, And from my perspective, it's like, it infuriates me to think that the impact that they have and to deflate people's belief in what they can do and what they can continue to do, I think is really, and this is really important, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, and I look at this from a diversity perspective in all walks of life, we have a responsibility really to improve everybody's belief in what they're capable of, what they can do. That's when I look at diversity, that's where it starts, right? It's about giving people the belief that they can achieve things.
So there are two things in there that I hear. One is the opportunity piece, and the second is the belief piece. Opportunity, I completely agree that people should have the ability to do at least try to do what they want to do.
Yep.
I was reading a few weeks ago about a student who went to university, came from a background where nobody had been to university, and did not know until the second year that she had access to a living allowance. Because of her background, she could have accessed that. Why did she not know this? Because nobody around her in her social milieu actually knew this is how the game is played. So the opportunity may be given, but what it takes then to make good on that opportunity itself is a loaded mechanism, right? People who have had university, educated people in their family in a particular country, they know that these mechanisms exist. They also may have the confidence to go up to somebody and say, can you tell me what this is?
Yes.
Or approach somebody or write to somebody and say, can you explain this? Or how does this work? And so on. And this person may not have had that. So one is that opportunity piece. When we say giving people the opportunity equally is important, we have to remember that the opportunity itself is not equal. The access is only the beginning. Making good of that opportunity is a whole different thing. The belief thing is quite interesting because it shows up in many different ways and it's very varied individual to individual. And I have seen examples both ways where it can't just be narrowed down to like somebody's gender or somebody's age or somebody's ethnicity. Indeed, we can have a lot of confidence, completely because somebody is ignorant and they don't know what is going on. But the belief thing is, I feel, mostly an internal thing. As I say to my students, I can teach you, but the learning has to be done by you. I can't learn for you. You have to eat and chew your own food. I can give you the food. I can present it in multiple colors and I can present it in attractive ways, but you're going to have to put it in your mouth and chew it and process it and derive the energy from it and so on. So I think the belief thing is more intrinsic and circumstances outside can crush it. But I also feel that diversity is very situational. I was in an interview. I didn't get the job. I was in an interview for chairing a particular sports body, and now I'll tell you who it was so you'll figure it out. So a very famous sports captain was on the panel. He's very well known and lovely guy. And I said to him, there was a conversation about what's the difference between diversity and inclusion. And I said, diversity is situational. If we were having this interview in Bombay, you, sir, would be the diversity. And people around the table laughed nervously. And I said, so, but at the same time, we are in London, so I'm kind of the diversity, right? But inclusion is a practice. It's cultural and it is a practice. So people can bring whatever they bring. They can bring all the belief. But if the room is the kind where the chairman is the only person who's right, it doesn't matter how much belief you have. The culture is such that it'll be crushed. It'll not be valued. Indeed, it'll be actively devalued. So to me, these are two different things and they take a lot. And as I often say to people, that it shouldn't take a person to lean on their self-confidence to make a contribution in their job, in their boardroom, whatever role they are playing, because that actually says something terrible about your culture, which doesn't allow them the space to just be themselves. They shouldn't have to actually say, but I'm going to be the tall poppy, I'm going to be the loud person who will then be given the side eye to, and so on. So inclusion is a practice.
People build belief based on feeling educated, informed. Confidence comes from having a, first of all, grounded knowledge in and feeling like you're well prepared or well equipped to deal with a situation or to take advantage of an opportunity. Obviously, your book, we've got it, Uncharted Spaces. I'm very excited to read this. It's out when, sorry?
On the 14th of April, 2026.
Amazing. Good. Yeah. Got probably the coolest cover I've ever seen.
Yes, I would like to agree with you completely. Yes,
I love it. Yeah, and there's no way that's not going to get spotted on the shelves. So, yeah, super. And just tell us a bit about the book. Help us understand a little bit about it.
So, Uncharted Spaces, Reset the Agenda, Reimagine the Boardroom is a book that's for people who are either aspiring leaders or serving leaders, whether they are in boardrooms or adjacent to boardrooms or boardroom -1 kind of level, who are building while the ground is shifting, because there is no option. We are in difficult circumstances now. And in fact, I was writing the book in 2025. I interviewed directors from around the world to identify shared themes and identify things that they mentioned in passing, which is how the chapters on technology, geopolitics, and climate action came to be written about. And it's very clear that last year itself, we were feeling a little bit like out of sorts, if we might say that. And we were aware that the situation we are dealing with right now, not just individually technology is doing this or this is happening geopolitically, but all of them all at once, acting upon businesses, up and down, sideways, if you're a global business globally, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So the idea is that if we are in a situation which we don't recognize, and almost nobody alive remembers this kind of situations before, individually, yes, but not all at once, then we have to reconsider whether our methods, our approaches, and our way of conceptualizing problems and solving problems is relevant. And that's where the final part of the book is, which is the subtitle as well, Reset the Agenda. Look at what you talk about.
How well equipped do you think boardrooms are today to deal with this new territory?
I think it is variable. Some boardrooms are very switched on. I mean, some of the people that I talk to, at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I would do anything to work with you in your boardroom. And I have been through several conversations, not for the book, I will add. I'm in several communities of board directors, etc., where some of the questions asked are quite terrifying because they're so basic.
Yep.
And you're like, how does this work? That you are working in this situation and this is your question. Nothing wrong with curiosity. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's one of my biggest, strengths, looking into things and asking questions, not afraid to look into learning stuff and learning the hard way. But there is a level at which there are certain things you should know. Because people have assumed that you know that. That's why you are in this particular job. So there's huge amount of variation. And there is also baggage. One of my interviewees said about the higher education sector that the boards are 15, 20 people, 2-hour meeting. The maths just doesn't add up.
Yeah.
And moreover, the paperwork is less than the quality that should come to the board. It's more informational. The board's job is not to get information. That they absorb by engaging with the business anyway. The board's job is to talk about strategic issues, talk about the future. If there is a crisis, have we actually game planned it, war gamed it and figured what we would do? Who are the people who will deal with it, who will keep the BAU going, etc. So the preparedness is variable. But there are some exceptionally good chairmen, some of whom I have interviewed and quoted. There are some exceptionally good directors, some of whom I have interviewed and quoted, some of whom are no longer in boardrooms, but show up in various conversations and mentor people and coach people and so on.
Yeah. Is there going to be a big shift to much more technology or technologists that sit on boards as we go through this period?
Which kind of technologist? That is the question.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the point is that right now you might have a CTO that sat on the board, CISO, CIO. You might have one or two members of a 6 or 8 or 10-man team, which are kind of technology focused. Are we going to see more technology focused people? Is that going to shift so that people are far more technology aware and have much more technology focus in those boardrooms over the next 5 years?
So there are lots of different questions in there.
There are, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we have witnessed in our lifetime is how what used to be called IT is now very many specialized things. There's business technology, there's operating technology, there's customer-facing technology, all kinds of stuff, right? What we've also seen, what used to be a harmless IT manager now is a job that is thinly carved out into specialized pieces like the CIO, CTO, the CISO, and chief data officer. Some businesses have chief AI officers and so on. How big can your boardroom table be? And whom do you bring? That becomes a question. That is from the executive side, right?
Yes.
And if you pick one of them, or like the Swiss presidency, give them a round table, like a round robin, 6 months you do this, 6 months you do this, how will you know if your board doesn't have the capability? How will you know that the person who's representing everybody's point of view actually is representing what the real situation is, right? Experts and non-experts once again. And the second thing that you mentioned about technology, comfort with technology, etc., my point of view is that a tech illiterate board director is an active danger to a company. Everybody needs to understand however complex it is. If that's not your cup of tea, it's a different conversation. Everybody must understand the technical context in which the business is operating. They don't have to know every single piece of software in the company, but they must understand what challenges, big picture challenges, the business is dealing with. What are the enabling technologies? What are the supporting technologies? What could completely destroy you? And so on. At the same time, I would say that picking that one person from the executive team and making that person the fall guy or the spokesperson of, all tech pieces, both of which they're quite suboptimal choices. So my proposition in the book is boards need somebody who is a technology polyglot, which is a person who can actually connect the dots to make the full picture and communicate it effectively so that the board understands its relevance to the business that they are overseeing.
It's a new reality, isn't it?
It is a new reality.
It is it's definitely, when you talk about that, whether you like it or not, you kind of, it might not be your cup of tea, it might be, but the point is that it is your new reality, whether it's your cup of tea or not.
Yeah.
The facts are that the information that your business, your customers are consuming is reshaping how everyone thinks. We can use some of this information, things that happen, and that can inform us as to what the likely scenario is. But if you're thinking that we're going to get ahead by implementing or doing any of these things, you're going to be so late to the table.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to have this vision and commitment to a very different kind of future.
Yeah, an optimistic vision. Because without it, we are all just going to deflate ourselves. We don't even need anybody else to do it to us. So an optimistic vision and an inclusive vision.
Yes.
And my recurrent, conversation with people is, who are we doing all this for?
What do you mean by inclusive vision, though? Just help me understand that. What does that mean?
So what inclusive in this instance means is we have to remember that we are not just doing it for the shareholders who are on our shareholder register today, because those shareholders will pass on their shares, hopefully, to somebody else. That somebody else is the next generation.
The way the world works today, I just don't see, and you tell me if I've got that wrong, but that's my analysis of the situation. The person which has got the leanest, most focused strategy getting to the goal will be the one that wins.
So we mentioned earlier about the social contract.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What you're describing is a kind of a prisoner's dilemma. If one company does it, that we are not going to fire anybody, cut costs, We don't care what anyone thinks. We are just going to offshore to the cheapest place. By the way, the transportation costs will go up, so there's
Yes,
no
yeah.
such thing as cheapest place. And other companies don't, right? You know how the prisoner's dilemma matrices work. That company is going to be doing things differently and may have an outcome which disrupts the industry and not necessarily in their favor.
Yeah.
So, whether an organization makes decisions that are aligned with their sector's broad direction or does something innovative, that's how I hear your question. Do they do something innovative? And does that innovation have to be in product and service offerings at affordable or manageable costs? Or does that have to come from whatever is wrapped up under operational efficiency, typically involving headcount reduction? You know why Henry Ford used to pay his workers well?
Because they need to be able to afford to run the cars that he was building.
No.
Oh, really?
If anybody had to poach his workers with
Okay.
experience, that party had to pay more,
Yes.
thereby starting off on a back foot from a
So
profitability
basically, to
point.
retain his staff. Yeah.
To attract and retain, right? So he used to pay them well so that
Josh,
nobody could complete.
Google that. It's question that. That's interesting. Someone told me, and I not I don't believe you. I do believe you. I'm interested to see whether it was also for the reason, or if I've got that completely wrong. Because I'm sure
No,
that someone told me that story the other day.
That's the easy story. That story gets told,
Yes.
no doubt. But the reason why he was doing it was to
Yeah.
retain his staff.
Retain his staff. Yeah.
Because when he retained his staff,
Yeah.
he retained know-how.
Yeah.
He retained expertise. He retained their insight.
But we're seeing that the most successful businesses in the world are the ones which do talk about, this relentless focus. And actually they dismiss DEI and stuff like that. They've got this relentless focus on achieving the goals. And the reason I propose it is just because, not that I want it, but does inclusion in these things actually get even more compromised due to the speed of innovation to get to these goals?
I think the question you are exploring is
Yeah.
the balance between effectiveness and efficiency.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
And there is research on that.
Yeah, great.
I refer you to 250 references in the book.
Yeah.
But there is research on it which talks about how heterogeneity in a group or a diverse team can work on certain kinds of tasks quicker and certain kinds of tasks slower, but are overall more effective. And I've cited two different kinds of research in the book. So both paths are possible, but it is up to an organization what they're really pursuing. That said, I will remind you, if you would have read this anyway, Satya Nadella said at the World Economic Forum that, and I'm paraphrasing broadly, that the reason why AI adoption is not going fast is because organizations have to learn to work with it, change how they are working now. Like, say that again. You want me to change everything in my life so you can sell me more licenses? That is not how technological innovation actually gets uptake. If the thing is truly effective and truly innovative, and it adds something to the lives of people who are using it, they will fall over each other to acquire it. This is not a sales pitch.
Yeah.
That you have to change everything. You are too stupid. You're not changing fast enough. That's why you're not adopting AI.
Well,
I'm not making this up.
Microsoft are struggling, aren't they?
They are not. They
they're
have the biggest distribution advantage.
Yes.
Every corporation that doesn't do graphics only
Yeah.
actually is on Microsoft platforms.
I mean, actually, they've taken a good approach, which is that they've gone for the foundations of AI, and actually they're product agnostic, LLM agnostic. Their personal AI model, the Copilot's an absolute nightmare, but they're failing badly with that. But you're right, actually, their broader strategy is going to turn out to be a good one, isn't it? Because they're completely agnostic. Their Azure platform means you can use any of their any AI infrastructure, and I think actually
who's doing better?
Yeah, I think that actually they're catching, they're keeping ahead keeping ahead. I think they're keeping up with the growth that AWS and Google was having. But yeah, Apple, talk to me.
Apple is doing much better. And Apple owns the entire stack and they have not really tried to develop. And obviously, lots of mockery in the press and everything. And
Yeah.
I should say at this stage that I'm not really a fangirl of anything. If you ask
Yeah.
me to name one musician, I'll probably say Mark Knopfler and stop there. But I have to say, watching how Apple actually has built their thinking thesis, and I unpacked some of it with their VLSI technology in the book starting in the 90s. To me, preparing, and nobody was talking about AI then. Nobody was talking about, AI in 2008 when somebody was sitting there talking about NLUs. And you just keep going because that's where pure exploration from first principles is taking you.
Yeah.
And they are doing on-device AI rather than requiring you to deal with something more capex heavy. I think they are the winner.
Yeah.
And their distribution advantages, you have an iPhone, I have an iPhone, and I practically have an Orchard because I own other Apple products, and I'm sure.
Yeah.
so
Dan
do
Bowyer
you, right?
of
So
he's a VC said exactly the same thing. He said Siri wins.
yeah, that's the key thing. What does the customer care about? The customer cares about, does this work for me? So on the one hand, there are people who are very happy to look at a smaller and smaller window and look at the world through that. It's almost like being in a prison, right? There is a little bit of something and you can see daylight coming through it. And there are people who want to expand their aperture and look at stuff because that's what tells you what small data point might become a tsunami that hits your business or that changes your way of thinking and so on. And I think there is a choice to be made. So whether a company is going a certain way is determined, in my view, by whether they're chasing efficiency or they're chasing effectiveness. Yes. And innovation should actually bring both. But innovation is nothing till somebody actually adopts it, uses it, and feels their lives are better for it. Nearly all the things that we are reading is that people feel that they're doing more work because they are being told to use this tool or that tool. And indeed, there's a study I quote, which was not the best design study, but there were, I think, around 19 engineers who were told, okay, use these LLM tools in what you're doing. And they predicted that they would save 20% or thereabouts time if they were using these tools. The study completed, and then they asked them, how much time do you think you saved? And they all came up with a bigger number than they had predicted. In reality, they had taken more time to finish the task because to prompt the tool, to actually see it is putting out, and they knew their stuff. So the outputs, they were able to see whether the output was valid, useful, correct, all kinds of stuff. But it added more to their work. So if, going back again to our boardrooms and leadership, if they don't understand what the tech is doing, and coding is the one thing that everybody says, oh, but now everybody can write their apps and write their codes. You can't put a vibe-coded app in the Apple Store, by the way, as of the day of recording this. So people are talking about it, but look at what jobs are actually being advertised. There are more jobs for software engineers than for any other type in the US at the moment. So the whole hype around, oh, coding is going to be totally automated and stuff really needs to be taken with a big pinch of salt. And equally, leadership must understand, what are these tools for? What are you trying to achieve? Because otherwise, it's a very disruptive transformational exercise inside an organization. What are you trying to achieve by implementing it? And moreover, there was an interesting bit of news 2 weeks ago or thereabouts. KPMG apparently told their auditors to cut their fee because they're implementing AI. KPMG, however, did not reduce their fee to their customers.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, two can play the game or not play the game at all. Yeah. So there is a lot of different kinds of early days conversation that is happening at the moment. Being able to separate the hype from reality and the reality of your organization. What is it that you are trying to do? And essentially, if AI didn't exist, what is the problem you'd be solving? Can you solve that problem without these tools? Are you still solving that problem, or are you playing with the new tool?
I'd suggest, though, the problem that needs to be resolved here is is right at the customer level, right? And so I think the people that lose at this AI game, okay, are the ones which are thinking about how do I get AI to put too much emphasis on how do I get AI to replace the things that humans do. And I think the real winners are the ones which go, how does AI and other technologies completely transform the customer experience?
I suddenly had 4 stories pop up in my head, and there is a thread that runs through them, and it's called airlines. So there's a friend of mine who is, as we speak, transiting from India to Toronto via Abu Dhabi. Don't ask. This morning, he was stuck in Abu Dhabi.
Wow.
Because they said, your flight's been cancelled. His bag, by the way, is on its way to Toronto. So God help. Took him 2 hours to move 10 minutes in a queue at the airport. And he described that while he was there, he was basically watching a lot of conversation, hand waving, how people kind of get frustrated and start talking with their hands and pointing at a screen, right? And his droll take on this was, this is where an agent would be super helpful, because that agent must go out and look at all the hotels where the rooms are available within a certain price parameter that I can get to, taking a taxi from the airport, so on and so forth. But I still need to solve the ticketing problem, for which I have to stay here, because they are not doing it via an agent. Human beings are solving this. Story number 1. Story number 2, you remember what happened to a poor Air Canada flight in a fire truck in the US?
Yes.
That poor guy, the air traffic controller, continued to be there for 2 more hours after that crash happened, which killed people and killed the pilots and led to a non-flying plane, basically, on the tarmac, right? So that's the other one. The third story and fourth story are kind of related. One actually is also about Air Canada. Poor Air Canada. Canadians mustn't feel that I'm, saying bad things about them.
Yep.
They implemented a bot at the customer service end. That bot told a customer that the customer who was looking for a bereavement discount on their ticket, as you know, airlines have standby seats for people traveling for reasons of bereavement. You can buy a ticket at full price and you can ask for a discount later. So the person took the advice, bought the ticket, and the airline said, not happening. You should have read the policy. So the guy took them to court, where they tried to argue that we don't make the decisions, the bot makes. Okay. Lost it, had to, recompense and all of that. And the fourth story you'll remember from last year's Delta, where somehow the news started to float that Delta was going to use customer behavior and all kinds of buying behaviors, etc., to predict what pricing they would show you and me, let's say 2 people, for the same flight, going on the same path, the same route, everything. And a senator then asked, are you going to do differential pricing, and how are you going to do it? You should do it transparently. They were besides themselves trying to explain that they are not doing this. None of these things enhance any business's brand equity or makes them more desirable from a customer's point of view. Now, these 4 different stories, other than the agent going around looking for hotel, but the friend, mind you, he still doesn't know what flight he's on, so he can't even book a hotel because he doesn't know. Which of these would you like solved with an AI? Would you go on a flight which is being flown not by a human but by an AI tool? Would you rather be given a bereavement fare by a bot that the company then tries to say we don't control those decisions and tries to wash their hands off like Pontius Pilate? The point is there are lots of different business decisions which are customer facing and customer impacting, where human oversight is going to be needed because it needs a judgment call that you can't really build into what is available to us today.
I can't help but think that intelligence is going to reach a place where it is consistent and accurate. Can I have an agent resolve that query that you said about the booking issue without me going to court for it. Again, arguing the fact, going through all the legal, I have no doubt within a few years, probably much sooner. Booking the hotel, yes, I mean, it's happening. That'll be Siri. Consumers' expectations and behaviours change. And how do they want those problems solved in a new way when there are adjacent technologies that come available, And so, I mean, a great one there is clothes, right? So, I currently I buy clothes. A lot of people buy them. I don't, but buy them, get them delivered, try them on, send them back. That's going to be transformed with AI, isn't it? Because you'll be able to see yourself, what you look like in those clothes before they arrive. Do you know what I mean? You'll just have your avatar and try on all the clothes you want, and so that whole experience will be simulated. And so if you're trying to right now, if you're in that clothing space and you are trying to improve the speed of deliveries and returns, you're going to lose because someone's going to solve that experience. And the moment that they've got something world class to simulate that experience unbelievably, and then be
so you're adding lots of adverbs to it. So many years ago, there is an American catalog company called Land's End. I remember attending a conference, Business Week or something, where there was a discussion around, they were a catalog company and they were quite, in the beginning, they were resistant to doing e-commerce. But they found that when they did do e-commerce, the sales did not cannibalize the business they were getting from the catalog. It actually grew their business. So that was one thing that just popped into my head. I have been buying stuff from Amazon for 28 years. I used to live in a non-English speaking country, and there were 2 bookstores in my city which had the exact same stock. And I obviously couldn't fly every week to Heathrow to buy books and stuff, so I was ordering them from Amazon. We have to remember that while it was benefiting people like me to have access to, English language books, Amazon also was a business that didn't make money for a very long time, in spite of being listed. Now, as a board director, you have to navigate both of these things together. You have to keep your shareholders believing in your vision. And one day we are going to make money. Trust us. Keep your money invested in the company while trying to build their customer base. And if you look at many of the Silicon Valley startups from that time, a lot of them ran like loss leaders for a very long time. And to the airline examples and other conversation we had, a lot of the problems are being solved in a closed loop. It is when the problem takes off tangentially that you have to be able to solve it. And that's where the test of a tool might be. We have the DLR in London. It's a closed loop driverless train, right? And there's invariably somebody sitting where you want to sit so you can see where the train is going and so on. But it's a closed loop solution. It keeps going in a certain way. And even in terms of looking at the driverless cars, I haven't been in California in some time, so I have not been in a fully autonomous Waymo. But I visited last, I think, 2018. And I remember in Mountain View standing at a light and the driverless car is being tested. And there's a guy sitting in the driver's seat reading a book or a newspaper. And when the light changes, the car takes off. And I remember the early days that people were complaining that if you got stuck behind an autonomous car, it won't let you overtake it. You were stuck behind it forever. So there were some interesting things that have obviously been ironed out. And they are solving interesting problems, which shows up in how competitive reaction happens. So for example, a lot of people started talking about how they are letting their young children, not small children, but teenage daughters and sons, use an autonomous taxi to go somewhere rather than go with a human being that they didn't know. And then Uber came with a variant, which is women riders can ask for a woman driver. which is a business a friend of mine wanted to create in 2011. And it was really difficult because it required getting a dispensation to create what looked like gender discriminatory product offering. But the problem she was solving for was women want to be assured of safety in a car. Indeed, my favorite driver on Uber is a woman. And I have her number. And I have an understanding with her of how we operate. But she's the one who takes me everywhere.
Right with you.
So there are lots of different fixes that human beings do when technology is imperfect. But at a business level, if it has to serve the customer, hopefully profitably. Otherwise, it's very difficult to tell your shareholders, hold off. Not making any money yet. Not making any money yet. And by the way, not going to be able to sustain this revenue growth or profit, without profitability either. So there are different considerations which we have to take into account in any new tech that comes in. And we are old enough to remember a pre-internet world. I was a very early user of the internet, and the two things that I'm on record, actually, I wrote somewhere about not buying online, diamonds and shoes. Because shoe fit is very difficult to get right, and different shoes have different kind of, and your feet are not similar. Left and right are not similar. So there's a limit to doing that. But to your clothes example, that is already available, but that's not AI. That is just you putting in dimensions of your body,
Yes.
and that, creating a model and seeing how it looks. But that requires that the dress or the particular piece of clothing that you're looking at, the inventory detail is also 100% accurate for it to work. So there's so many factors that go into making success of any technological fix that are invisible to most people. And it's the same in case of AI. It's massive because you are saying change your workflow, change how you train people, change what their different people's roles are. And in regulated professions, the person who signs off is liable.
Yeah, and this is a really interesting point, isn't it, right? And because I had this argument with someone the other day, or debate around it, and we were talking about AI lawyers, and their perspective came back about who's going to sign it off. And I said, well, let's just think about that from a legal perspective. How many people do you think have downloaded a tenancy agreement from a website online and then not had it checked by a lawyer and just used it? And I'd say it's probably 99% of landlords. They've just taken, the fact it's got 500 reviews and they're 4.9 stars and okay, it's 20 quid. Great, done, fixed. And so, again, you have to kind of look at consumer behaviour on that, right? Which is that, there's just multi-points to it. I would suggest that if I have an AI lawyer that produces, I don't know, employment contracts, and I've got 20,000 stars, 4.99 effectiveness, rated by XYZ, reviewed by whoever, always compliant, always meets. I trust that over talking to, your average human lawyer who I've got to then rely on to maybe keep me updated with any legislation or whatever it might be. So I think it's just thinking about it. My point is, I agree with the point that you raised, which is that, and actually I see it as the problem, which is that the internal challenges of running a big organization and enterprise today are what may well get in the way of them of being exclusively focused on the right goals. And I'm concerned that there may be, well, I'm not concerned, I think that there will be a lot of large organizations over the next 3 years which might well get found out, which might really be impacted by people solving problems in novel ways.
So I'll ask you a question. It's a very one-on-one question. Why do we think regulation exists? Regulation exists when it is likely that there is a market failure, and it is likely that parties don't have equal information or otherwise a power imbalance, right? And market failures can take several forms. In a free market, you should be able to sell anything you want, and anybody in the market, let's say me or and Josh and everyone on your team should be able to buy it from you. There can be 5 other people who are selling everything you are selling at similar or different prices and be able to buy it. But you may decide that we are not going to sell this to short people. private business. You can choose you're not going to sell it to short people, so you immediately exclude me. That technically is a market failure, and therefore a legislation might say that you will not unreasonably exclude people from being your customers. And the regulation is basically trying really hard to prevent that failure happening by giving people some kind of direction or guardrails, right? So, in case of, let's say, the tenancy agreement example, you and I have signed enough contracts in our life to know the answer to this. When do we actually use a contract? When we are signing it is one moment, when we take the document out and sign it. And two, when we want to get out of it. So we sign it, we see the contract when we are signing it. The next time it comes out of the drawer or the file folder or whatever is when we are trying to cancel it or get out of it or dispute it. And the regulation typically is to make sure when the dispute happens, you're not dealing with a situation where one party in the agreement has disproportionate power over another party. Corporations have lost out where it has been proven in court that the corporation had disproportionate power over the situation, such as, have you ever read the terms and conditions of a website? We all tick, right? There are several lawsuits where courts have said no reasonable consumer can be expected to read this much guff, right, before signing off just to interact with the business. So the automation of lawyers' outbursts is a similar challenge. Pretty much every court situation, which is when you are in a dispute, that has come up, where there has been AI assisting a lawyer in the court. Pretty much every example that I've come across is where the judge has found they've made up case law things which are mentioned in the argumentation being submitted by one side's lawyer or the other. And some kind of oversight is required to make sure this is not happening, because it then leads to collapse of a case, use of public money or abuse of or waste of public money and time, judicial bandwidth, all of that. And then lawyers might get wrapped on the wrist for wasting everybody's time because they didn't do the oversight. And the other thing also is that from a legal point of view, you probably know this, that even law firms that are implementing AI are getting third-party law firms to read the contracts between them and the AI provider. Because the contracts are completely different from the contracts they may have signed for any other licensed product or SaaS product before this, right? So just like any other profession, law evolves. And therefore, a degree of being able to see what has changed and what you're signing up to before your board signs off and says, yeah, go ahead, spend the millions, right? So that level of kind of accountability. At the end of the day, what does the board do? The board draws accountability from the executive. The executive have to provide assurances to say, yes, we have done this, yes, we have done this, and the board's eventual ask is to ask questions. And then when the answers are given back, satisfy themselves that these answers are sufficiently assuring so that they don't expose the business, the whole business, to disproportionate risk. And that's when the boards kind of approve decisions that come. That is all people do. So in a legal situation, it's no different. To know which situations you mustn't use automation is the judgment, which is not yet automated. And to your point earlier that you feel maybe this will happen in the next 2 or 3 years, I come back to the point that knowledge itself is unevenly distributed and is not codified in a manner that the large or small language models that are currently available have made sense of them. So to keep the aperture really narrow is something that I find most interesting when somebody is willing to admit to it on a podcast and he's a journalist. I'm like, wow, dude, I listen to your podcast. I don't listen to many podcasts. I listen to a few. And that really blew my mind. It really did. Because my perspective is in uncharted spaces, your aperture needs to be wide. So you can see what is going on. There is a lot of stuff that without understanding what it is capable of doing, we haven't done. And now we are allowing it to be automated at scale. And we may repeat the same mistake, is all I'm saying. I'm not making the case against it. There are things that can be done really well. Small businesses. I met somebody whom I intend to invite to have a conversation, who runs a really small tight ship. And he said, which, because they're a startup, they were able to automate certain things, and how they're accounting for their investors' money in a more responsible way by saying we are doing this more efficiently and we check in this way. And it was really fascinating. That is possible. We started by talking about this being a nation of small shopkeepers. Great possibility, right? Absolutely everything. But for large organizations, these are enormous cultural and technological transformations with potentially much larger impacts on employment, and therefore on what happens to the people. If you fire 100,000 people, what happens to those people? Maybe we don't care. Maybe some people don't care. But we should care, because if everybody fires 100,000 people, we suddenly have a huge number of unemployed people, whole different societal problem.
And that comes back to your social construct and the contract that we have to hold people accountable to it. And it's where regulation will have to step in.
Yes.
And that's why I think about this, particularly around larger organisations.
Yeah.
I can't help but think exactly the last point you just raised, which is their vulnerability due to their size and their ability to move, but also, most importantly, the responsibility that they have, not to their shareholders, to all the people working for them. That's the real threat here, isn't it?
It can be. I mean, a lot of companies that have been firing quietly or not so quietly were also people who were warehousing talent. In the 90s, there was one particular internet hardware company which used to make acquisitions to warehouse patents just to keep other people from accessing that intellectual property, right? And there has been a lot of warehousing of talent. Like, people are hired just to take them off the market. And when they realize that they can't either retain them or have enough, creative work for them, they have dumped them because they are trying to cut costs. Neither of these, to me, is strategically defensible. And I have always maintained that at scale, redundancies are a strategic failure. Somebody needs to stand up and own up to it. One or two people being taken out because of performance problems is not quite the same as taking out 20% of your workforce. That says something else.
Do you feel like that with AI, though? Because because of the sudden impact of it, no one was able to really predict the impact that it was going to have if you go back 4 years.
I would say that the real impact hasn't happened because people's adoption is not as advanced or sophisticated as the hype would like us to believe. Yeah. If you look at the hiring patterns, for example, of some of the major model companies, they are all doing two things. One, they are creating alliances or distribution relationships with professional services companies that have inroads into large organizations, because these professional services companies also know how the processes in those organizations work. How is the purchasing happening? Who is the decision maker? Who are the influencers? The second kind of jobs they're hiring for is marketing, right? And why are they doing this if there is such gangbusters success? They are not. There is no gangbusters success.
We're seeing on a regular basis, nearly every technology company in the world is talking about the fact, right? There'll be some that aren't, where they might need new skills, right? But fundamentally, they're going to need less engineers to achieve more output. And I've spoken to two people in the last 2 or 3 weeks, which are reducing their headcount, from a technology perspective by 40% because of the level of productivities. One of our own businesses was about to go through an acquisition, and it was about to acquire a business and the team, and it went, do you know what? The value we're paying for the revenue doesn't stack up because I can build the technology in 12 weeks. And so there's significant, the distribution. The president of Y Combinator has come out today and said that, nearly 100% of coding is automated for a lot of their businesses, and so they're really at a tipping point right now where that's only going to get better. Coding will be fully automated this year. That's just that is happening. I would be. It might not do in really high infrastructure complex areas, but where 90% of the employment is, and so you'll still need people to apply it. And don't get me wrong, you'll still need architects and people to do that. The issue is that we've seen it AI adopt in that space, and I think we're seeing organisations. We've just seen Meta say they're laying 20% off. We've just seen Jack Dorsey lay 40% of his team off. And so I would suggest that has happened in quite a short period, hasn't it? Really, last 24 months. It's just kind of, or last 12 months. It's really starting to happen.
I'm still of the mind of looking at where were they making money before, because a lot of these are not. They're essentially cost cuts rather than we are doing this because we have achieved something dramatic using AI. So I don't want to drag my boards into this, but I do sit on fund boards. And one of the most interesting thing to observe is to read how businesses actually make money. And therefore, looking at operating cash flow of a business is a very interesting indicator. But it's such a boring thing that people will buy the growth numbers without asking the profitability question. And, as people who have worked in, around, and with businesses, we know what questions to ask for to assess the health of a business.
Well, it's fascinating having this conversation with you. Look, what's really interesting is you've made me really think about things. And I look at this through a very small context window, right, which is a very limited space. And I'm so curious about what the bigger impact. My visibility on larger organisations is nowhere near yours. Like you're in those circles, sat on the boards of larger organisations. You're connecting with executives and directors, and the research that you've done for your book gives you an incredible, window into that. And I have the same thing when I talk to scientists, and I talk to them about my expectation going into the conversation is that, we're gonna solve so many problems now that we've got AI, and they go, no, well, it is helping, but you need to understand that it's not this much of what we do. It's this much of AI that's really accelerating what we're doing. It's a narrow kind of stream of it. And so it's really interesting to get that perspective today. And thank you for taking the time to deal with my provocative challenges and questions, I guess, just to really...
Not at all. I think you're right to describe what you just did about how your scientist guests have described something. If you think about where AI is making an impact, drug discovery. But we only care about drugs and medications and treatments when we are unwell. Nobody willingly wants to sit here and talk about drug discovery because it's such a specific and niche area of doing things. And the most exciting thing that happened in drug discovery was biotech. And when about over 20 years ago now, I wanted to do a master's thesis on biogenetics, which is effectively saying the first generation biotech drugs were coming off patent. I mean, surely it should be easy to make biogenetics. And it was a very interesting exploration because it's a completely different problem. In order to make biotech drugs, you need approval not just of the molecule and the drugs, you need approval of the manufacturing facility, which is a capex decision, enormous, right? So while chemical drugs could be replicated easily, biotech drugs were not, even if they were not under patent. But now we look at drug discovery, the whole protein folding work that has been done by Demis Hassabis's team, and they won a Nobel Prize, all of that for it. Yeah. That is a path-breaking thing that AI should look at. Collapsing 3 seconds in your delivery of, toilet paper. I'm sorry, that is not going to make a difference to humanity. So being able to, back to the question, what is the problem you were solving strategically? Would you have continued to solve it even if these tools weren't there? How were you solving it? Yeah. And are these tools improving that process? To me, that is the test of everything. Yeah. Of course, I will admit this. I have to keep on top of different tools and their capabilities and their comparative value and how they are going to or not going to make any difference, so that I can actually keep on top of what is going on, so that when we have conversations like ours, I can actually talk from a point of view of knowing something rather than reading somebody's secondhand opinion in a derivative way somewhere. But the question of impact, in terms of the environmental impact, the cost impact, what you're taking money from to invest in this, the impact on your people, impact on your workflows, the enormous cultural transformation required, and then in the future, impact on the shape of your organization, how you do hiring, how do you develop talent, how does the job of the leadership changes, how does the job change essentially for leadership? And then to our initial question, do boards understand this transformation? What commitment will they have to make? Over what time period? And are they motivated to make those dramatic changes and commitment to those changes when they won't be around to get credit for it? Long after their term has expired, something good might materialize. But yes, board directors get all the flack for what goes wrong in their term. Nobody remembers who was on the board when something path-breaking was done in their leadership. And as human beings, people can't separate this stuff in their head.
Yeah.
But it remains true that if we are dealing with uncharted spaces, or everything we did before probably is unhelpful. And maybe the most important agenda of the day is to talk about what will happen to our food supply chains in 6 months' time, and whether we'll have medicines and we will have, the devices that we need in order to basically function, do our work. Like we are using so much electronics in this room. If you had to replace them, if you replace them today versus 1 year from now, what is the cost difference going to be because of everything that's going on in the Strait of Hormuz? So thank you for having me.
No, pleasure. And it was a rapidly changing world, and thank you for taking the time out. It's been it's been brilliant to spend time with you.
Thank you.
Great.
Was messing with my patience.